Friends, would you pray with me? O holy God, ever present, take our lips and speak with them. Take our minds and think with them. Take our hands and work with them, our feet and march with them, and our hearts and set them on fire with love for you and all of creation. Amen. A few weeks ago, I lost my wedding band for the second time. Now, the first time was a far better story to tell. Mother Earth took it from me. I was playing catch in the ocean with my dear nephews about 5 years ago, and after that, at a meal table with Becky's family, after I said the grace before we ate, my hands instinctively went to my ring, and the memory wore off on my finger, and I noticed something was drastically missing. My heart stopped. I nearly stopped. Becky thought I was having a heart attack, but indeed something else happened. And so the next morning, I knew it was July 3rd because the next morning was the 4th of July, and we were at a beach area, and so I went faithfully at the crack of dawn with my badminton racket in hand and sifted through hundreds of feet of 4 feet deep ocean water looking unsuccessfully for that Celtic wedding band. Fortunately, I was able to replace that ring by the fair trade recycled gold Celtic company that first made it, and then it was re-blessed at the same sanctuary where we were first married 5 years earlier by our friend who's now the pastor of that congregation as we renewed our wedding vows. Okay, a couple weeks ago, that second wedding ring went missing. This time, it was a lot less of well, the first one was not exciting, but at least it had a good story behind it. This time, I lost it in a huge 4-foot-tall bin of plastic. Plastic, unfortunately, most of it cannot be recycled, as we know. So Beck and I subscribe to something called TerraCycle, which is part of our environmental sin. We pay for these huge boxes that come, and every couple months we stuff all of the plastic that doesn't get recycled. Baby wipe bins, coffee bags, cereal bags, oatmeal bags, all sorts of things that can't be recycled. And we shove it into these huge boxes and then send them off. And of course I was doing that, and the next morning I woke up and again found the ring missing. The wedding vows drowning in plastic, the covenantal love that I feel for my spouse, reminding of the covenantal love that God has for us and all of creation drowning in plastic. Powerful symbol. A year ago, exactly, our Eco-Stewards group was gathered in Hawaii. And we were introducing ourselves, as we always do, to the watershed where we visit, standing in a circle on an incredible beach looking out over Oahu's incredible ocean landscape. Our feet were caressed not only by incredible grains of sand, but tragically, thousands, millions of pieces of plastic. I've never seen so much plastic on a pristine beach in my life, reminding us of the environmental sin that is the great garbage patch, 3 times the size of France. Friends, our Mother Earth is hurting. And as our moral movement hymn goes, somebody's hurting my mother, and it's gone on way too long. Someone's been hurting my mother, and it's gone on way too long. Our Christian tradition from time to time has shied away from the association of Earth as mother, perhaps mainly due to a fear of paternalistic humanistic creep, but I would say also an overly paternalistic and male-centered expression of Christianity. But thanks be to God for people like Claire and Francis and Hildegard, who we heard of this morning. Earth is at the same time mother, for she is mother of all. In her contains the seeds of all. Of course, Pope Francis, who in his encyclical reminded us that a beautiful mother opens her arms to embrace all of us, knowing no difference. I think we can gain a lot from reclaiming this, and I like how we inserted changed a little bit of the text, the translation, I would say. This morning in our scripture from John, the mother and I are one. We know the Aramaic here is Abba, most commonly translated as father. At least the early writers of the gospel recorded it as father. I'm not sure exactly what Jesus had in his relationship with God and how he self-identified with God, but we know it's often referred to as the Father and I are one. But how refreshing is it to hear the mother and I are one from the very voice of Jesus, something we know God is way beyond gender and yet is within all gender identity. So we reclaim that idea this morning with a new view of mother and earth as one, and we are part of that. Some of the people we met in Hawaii taught us that we are earth. There is no distinction. We are made of stardust, of course. We are one with earth. Therefore, if the earth is hurting, we are hurting. Someone's been hurting my mother, and it's gone on way too long, and I won't be silent anymore, as our hymn goes. Friends, our mother is hurting as we have a president occupying the White House who's been bragging about abusing women, and through repeated executive orders has shown utter disdain for and systematic abuse of our Mother Earth. Should be no surprise. There is consistency here. Removing ourselves from the Paris Climate Agreement, opening public lands, national parks, wilderness areas, our own shorelines to dirty fracking and drilling. Our government has been hurting our mother. Our Secretary of State is not talking about climate change, but about the fortune of the Arctic melting so that we can put more oil tankers through the Northwest Passage. The biggest disturbance to this is a feeling that we can't change things. It feels overwhelming. Truth has been replaced for the lie over and over again. And yet we've heard powerfully two numbers of truth rise up these past few weeks, these past few months, thanks to the United Nations. 11 and 1 million. 11 is the number of years we have left to alter the course of climate catastrophe by reducing emissions by 40%. It's as simple as that. 11 more years. It's become a mantra for the young people who are going to change the face of this planet, thanks be to God. 11 years is what we have to make things right. 1 million is the number of species that are currently threatened, as we just heard the biodiversity report from the United Nations. 1 million out of 8 million in the next few decades are threatened with extinction. Our mother is hurting, and we cannot stay silent any longer. The church has an essential role to play in this, friends. It may seem like we are powerless. It may seem like the forces of the lobbyists, dirtied by oil and fossil fuel money, are much more powerful. But friends, I would venture to say that the truth is behind us and within the story of God in creation, calling us to care for it. We hear the words, America, America, a nation that kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to it, replacing Jerusalem with America here. How often have I desired to gather you, like a hen who broods over, but you are not willing. Can we be the church that helps our nation become more willing? Can we be the people who follow the lead of the Sunrise Movement and the climate strikers, those kids who get it, who are changing the course of our planet? I believe that we can. I am grateful this past week that Red Sox general manager Alex Cora and many other players of color refused to go to the White House in solidarity with standing up for how poorly our country dealt with itself as Puerto Rico suffered the ravages of climate change last year. Alex Cora, a native of Puerto Rico, said, "I will not visit with the halls of government who have ignored the climate catastrophes before us." That example of local example for the climate catastrophe is helpful for us, friends. It reminds us that we, too, like the Red Sox, are often divided along racial lines, even here in our own city. We are grateful, therefore, for the voices of those who rise up with courage, like Cora, but also like Ayan Presley, Marianne White-Hammond, Lisa Owens, Atia Martin, and others who in our city have been rising up to speak a different narrative into our midst. to hear the call of Ezekiel to become people who stand in the gap and become, like Isaiah, repairers of that gap and that breach and restorer of the streets to live in. Dr. Martin was a former Chief Resilience Officer for Boston and was a keynote speaker for that recent Interfaith Climate Summit held at Old South back in March, where a new group called The Crew was put on display. Communities responding to extreme weather. And Dr. Martin made it clear that what's happening in Boston as we face the inevitable sea level rises that will happen and the extreme weather events that will happen, there is disparity writ large across our landscape. Roxbury, Dorchester, Boston Medical Center will be the places that will flood first. Places like Boston University, which are higher elevation, will be preserved. What may happen, as the Pope has predicted, humans may rise to the challenge of climate change, but we may only do so by raising the walls around the wealthy and lowering the defenses for the poor. We have a role to play, dear friends. We, like the peace walkers, Diane and others this morning, who walked for peace, each step that they took from Dorchester to City Hall were lessening inch by inch that gap that exists here in Boston from the Back Bay to Mattapan, 7 miles but 7 worlds apart. Friends, we must see as the church, and we must be a voice for not only climate justice, but anti-displacement work. Climate gentrification is a new term that I've been coming into awareness around, thanks to the work of Lisa Owens in City Life, who is raising up this reality that there are people getting displaced here in Boston as the sea level is rising. We had dumpsters floating last year in the winter right down the Seaport District. As those things happen, people, the poor, are being displaced. We see that here. The underhoused, being neglected, as one Dalton Street, that sin of the fossil fuel empire, rises to house the uber wealthy and not the poor. Friends, what unique chance might we have as we are located here at Newbury and Berkeley Street, as the church, representing something that is far greater than us, the love of God in the world? What role might we play because of our location? We too, like Boston Medical Center, sit in that flood zone. 50-year event, 100-year event. Tom Reed can tell you a lot more about this based on all his past work and career around the environment here in Boston. Boston University has done some studies. Again, they're a little bit higher up, but we are in the critical flood zone. So what role might that require of us? What platform might we have because of that solidarity with the most vulnerable here in Boston? We representing not only our congregation, but the Women's Lunch Place. What role, what requirement might be asked of us in this light? I wonder if we might dream up some new ideas and new partnerships, not only with groups like City Life, who are calling us to the awareness of anti-displacement work. Here in Boston, there are 3 critical areas: the Greenway, Suffolk Downs, and parts of Dorchester, which are currently critical areas for those fighting to keep people in their homes. As gentrification happens, also influenced and fueled by climate change. Might we begin to partner in new ways with groups like City Life as a church? Might we, as a church, decide to buy a generator? Thousands of dollars, I'm sure, a solar-powered one, powered by batteries, that could be here to keep not only the lights on for worship, but mostly to bring people in when the storms do occur. Could we become a place of resilience, not only for Women's Lunch Place and our unhoused neighbors, but our housed neighbors as well? Might we become an example of Christ in our world in these new ways? Friends, there are many partnerships that we may look into as we become part of the resiliency that is required of us as we face the reality of our changing world. There are important opportunities for us to help those most affected in these times. The leading cause of death in emergency response situations here in our country is social isolation. It's not lack of water or lack of resources, but it's people being left alone. So friends, we as the church know how to be anti-social isolation experts. We know how to be with people and to make sure that people are checked on in times of tragedy, in times of emergency. So I wonder what kind of partnerships we may dream up. Mothers Out Front. Some of you are active members of that wonderful organization fighting for climate justice here in Boston and our world. The national office now has an eco-steward, Beth Roach, sitting at it. We have, as a collective community, access across faith and across climate action. I wonder if we might dream up some new partnerships with Mothers Out Front here in our midst. Our call to worship this morning, you may have noticed in our litany of sin and brokenness, this line: there is brokenness in the times we forget to pause and listen to the birds, to linger in the woods, to frolic in the rain. Now, I was thinking about this line as I was biking, having dropped off Rowan at preschool, and I was thinking about the line, and I'm not kidding, a downy woodpecker stopped me in my tracks in a tree nearby in a urban landscape and told me to pay attention to the thing that I was trying to lead us into in worship. Walk the talk, the bird told me. I love that Jesus, in our gospel reading from John today, was walking in a portico of Solomon. That's what the text says. He was walking in a portico. We remember that portico of the temple looked inward, it didn't look outward. There were pillars and there was a roof, but it looked inward to a vast area. And no question, Jesus could have seen the sky. He could have smelt the earth in that context. And it was winter, the text says. What a strange identification here in our scripture. It was winter when Jesus was doing that, and his friends asked him, "Why won't you tell us what's happening? Why do you keep us in suspense? Can you tell us who you are?" Jesus says, "Have you been listening? I am the Messiah. The mother and I are one." Jesus here knows what's happening on the earth, in his local landscape. He's inspired perhaps by the sky, the smell of the winter, perhaps the cold of that season. So too, friends, we are called to an awareness of the season we are in, to our local landscape as well, to pay attention to the indicators of change so that we can be also harbingers of peace and hope, not just destruction and chaos. I'm reading a book right now by Lauren Oakes called In Search of the Canary Tree, the story of a scientist, a cypress, and a changing world. And this book is unlike some of the other climate change-focused books of late. It's a hopeful book. It's a book about a scientist who studies the yellow cypress or the yellow cedar tree in the Pacific Northwest, parts of southeastern Alaska. Lauren has been studying this tree as it has been dying in rapid and vast numbers because of climate change. And instead of just telling a story of extinction, she, by carefully listening to that landscape and its peoples, the native wisdom in that area, and other scientists, have found out that the forest itself is recovering as a result. The western hemlock is rising up in response to the dying yellow cypress. She found images of the dying yellow cypresses, dying branches being embraced by western hemlocks, and then feeding off one another in this exchange. A radical vision of the ways of resiliency, even in the face of loss. So she tells us the story in this book, reminding us that hope is not an option. Hope is a requirement for us. Similar to what reformist Martin Luther said when he was asked, what would you do if you knew the end of the world was happening tomorrow? I would plant my apple tree, nonetheless. Friends, hope is a part of our story. And therefore, lastly, we're given this image of Tabitha, Dorcas, here in the Dorcas window. Here, we're reminded of that beautiful purple cloth that she holds in her hand. Tabitha, the one who our story reminds us, rises up. Against all odds, she rises from death. Peter, the recipient of God's voice and God's healing touch in the raising of Tabitha, the raising of Dorcas. Rise up, Tabitha, get up, are the words to this resurrection story. Friends, let us be reminded of this invitation to rise up with hope, with possibility, and with love in our hearts, love and charity, as Dorcas represents that purple cloth being the work of her hands that she gave in hospitality and care and charity for the poorest of the poor in her landscape. Let us rise up knowing that we do have a role to play, and there is hope even in the face of what seems at times to be hopeless. I want to end this time together by saying, thanks be to God, my ring was found. There's that verse throughout the Lord of the Rings, the ring wants to be found. I kept praying that as a dear mother in Rowan's life reminded me when I had lost it. She said, weren't yesterday you stuffing your hands into massive plastic boxes of plastic, and might the ring have fallen into one of those boxes? So the next day, I tore apart the 3 boxes which I had stuffed for hours, full of plastic, spread them out, and after, of course, the 3rd one, I found my ring. Friends, the reminder of covenantal love and promise is with us in the work of climate justice. May we envision new partnerships as a church. May we be excited about this work. And may we know that collectively in these 11 years, and God willing, the thousands of generations to come, that we would be representatives of the love of God, which is more powerful than death, that rises all of us up into ways of new life.